This is a video about Persona 3 Reload and its epilogue/expansion episode Aigis, or, as I will exclusively be referring to it from this point on, The Answer. Accordingly, there will be massive spoilers for all versions of Persona 3, and they will be appearing very quickly after this little spoiler warning. In this video, my operating assumption is that you have played either version of The Answer, or at least know what happens in it. I do not think this video will make sense if you do not know what happens in The Answer. As this is a video about Persona 3, I would like to give trigger warnings for simulated depictions of suicide and mentions of suicide. I would also like to give trigger warnings for blood and a brief mention of self-harm, although I will not be showing footage of self-harm. I use many different images of art in this video, and some of them are quite violent, so I would caution against watching this somewhere where that might not go over well. While this is certainly not a religious video, I am going to be discussing Christianity in the context of the themes of Persona 3, The Answer, and the work that The Answer is based on, so please be aware of that. There is one mistake I have to correct that I made during this video. Throughout it, I refer to the base story of Persona 3 as The Journey, which is what it is called in Persona 3 FES, and I was only reminded after finishing all of my recording that it is not called that in Persona 3 Reload. Finally, I am also told that this video is quite sad, so maybe get a tissue or something, I don't know. With all of that said, I think I have made something very special and unique here, and I really hope that you enjoy watching it. So there's something about The Answer that's mostly gone unnoticed. Virtually all of it, its story, its characters, its setting, and its themes are all built around one of the most famous works of literature in all of history. By the end of this video, hopefully you'll see The Answer and all of Persona 3 in a brand new light.
I want to go back.
I wish I could just be a simple machine again.
I have to be helpful to my sister. That's my only purpose.
And you're someone I care about, Yukari.
I know how painful it is to be left behind like that. If fixing or letting go of the past isn't the right way to think about it.
Because we're friends, aren't we? You truly are alive.
You might not have heard of the Divine Comedy, a three-part narrative poem from the early 1300s, written by Italian philosopher, poet, and politician Dante Alighieri. That's partially because most people only know of the first part of this unbelievably influential work from a writer who is more commonly referred to by only his first name, Dante's Inferno. But even though you certainly know Inferno, you still might not have read it. That's fine though. You don't need to have read a single word of any part of the Divine Comedy for this video to be worth your time. I'm going to be giving you all the context you need and doing quite a bit of in-depth analysis about this brilliant and profoundly moving game along the way, even some that you may not have heard before. The other reason you may not have heard of the Divine Comedy before is that it's not a book commonly read outside of academic settings. It's unbelievably complex. It incorporates politics, religion, physics, mathematics, geography, and astronomy from Dante's era and from the classical era. It's basically impossible to read it without a guide that outlines all of these things along the way. But it's one of the most foundational works of literature in all of history. there are entire fields of academic study devoted to the analysis of this book. So it makes sense then that there's not a huge overlap between people who've read it and people who've played the epilogue from a 2006 JRPG and or its remake. However, almost all of the answer is built around this poem. From its somber opening moment when Fuuka Yamagishi calls Yukari Takeba, to its euphoric and triumphant ending when Yukari and Aigis decide to become roommates, the connections between the answer and the Divine Comedy are ever present. I've realized quite early on in the production of this video that it's not worth your time to watch it if it's just me comparing things from Persona to a book that you probably haven't read. If you're kind enough to spend your time watching this, then in return I want to give you something more than just simple comparisons between these two works. Whether you've actually played the answer, watched a let's play of it or a cutscene compilation, or just read a plot summary, my hope is that from this video you'll walk away with a new appreciation for a piece of the Persona universe that often gets a bad reputation. To give you that, I need to provide the first two pieces of context here before we start talking about Persona. The first is a brief summary of Dante's life, and the second is a very quick outline of what this book is. Doing these parts now will help things flow much better later on in the video. So like I said earlier, Dante was a philosopher, poet, and politician. He was born in 1265 in Florence, and when he was a child, he met a girl his age named Beatrice Portinari. Even though they never married and only met each other twice, he would write that he loved Beatrice from first sight. Beatrice died in the year 1290, and her death had a profound effect on Dante. The immense love he felt for her and the immense grief he had over her death are two of the major inspirations behind the Divine Comedy, and Beatrice is a major character throughout the poem. Dante would later become involved in the politics of Florence, but when the political faction he was a part of found itself on the losing end of a power struggle, he would be exiled from the city. His exile was the other major inspiration behind the Divine Comedy, and he devotes large parts of it to commentary on those he deemed responsible for it. Dante would die in the city of Ravenna in 1321, just after publishing the final part of the Divine Comedy. In life, he was never given the chance to return to his native Florence, and to this day, his remains are still buried in Ravenna. The Divine Comedy has three parts, called canticas, and each cantica is split into chapters called cantos. The main character is a fictionalized version of Dante, and each cantica details his journey through part of the Christian afterlife. Inferno, that first and most famous part, sees Dante descending through the 9 circles of hell, after which he arrives at the base of Purgatory, a massive mountain that Dante climbs in the second part, Purgatorio. He does so in order to reach heaven, which is explored in the third and final part of the Divine Comedy, Paradiso. Paradiso culminates in Dante reaching the highest point of heaven, where God himself resides. As you might have deduced from that setting, and from the word divine in the Divine Comedy, this is an extremely religious book. So much literature from that era was, but the reason this is still relevant today, 7 centuries later, and the reason the answer is based on it is a much more secular one. Beneath all of that complexity and religious imagery, what this poem is really about is grief, love, and someone's search for meaning in life.
If something's mere presence can make you realize you're alive.
Using Dante's Divine Comedy as a framework, I'm going to be deconstructing the answer and exploring how its settings, characters, and even its very gameplay are all connected to its themes of grief and love, and its characters' search for purpose in life following Makoto Yuki's death. The doors in the abyss of time are all metaphors for grief, and I'll be exploring how in due course. First, however, there's another metaphor for grief right at the beginning of the answer, a metaphor that is inescapable for you, the player, throughout the ordeal that seas are subjected to. Wednesday, March 31st. In 2010, the year the answer takes place, Easter was on Sunday, April 4th. The Wednesday before Easter commemorates Holy Wednesday, when Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus before his crucifixion. And what the answer is doing by freezing these characters in a time loop on that day is showing just how deeply the surviving members of SEES feel they have failed the people they cared about and betrayed the things they believed in. It's these feelings of grief and failure that are explored in the Doors of the Abyss of Time, and we'll be talking about those doors in great detail shortly. Before we do, however, the answer's opening sequence is based on Inferno's and establishes quite a few essential character allegories between the two works, so we'll begin there and proceed through the answer in the order it's played in. Dante finds himself despondent and lost in a forest, and it's never explained to the reader how or why he's there. The same is true for the answer. We aren't shown how SEES reacted to Makoto Yuki's death or the way their grief developed in the 3 weeks after it. We simply see them trying in vain to live normally amidst the grief, and are left to imagine everything else. As a metaphor for having lost his way in life, Dante talks about how tired he is and how much he's been sleeping, and he questions if he can really go on living like this. Racked by grief over the loss of someone he loved dearly, Beatrice, and having gone adrift in life, we see the answer's first allegory. Aigis is Dante. The answer is full of inversions. It takes things from both the work it's based on and from the journey and inverts them in its exploration of grief. The first such inversion happens here in this allegory, because Aigis is not able to sleep. For Aigis, someone who is not human, no longer being able to do something that all humans need to, shows just how far she's gone astray from the life that she forged for herself, just as Dante's constant sleep shows how far he has gone astray from his. At the start of the answer, Aigis's once vibrant personality is almost completely non-existent. In the journey, she's energetic, she's inquisitive, she's earnest, and she's silly, and she enjoys being around her friends. But when we see her on Wednesday, March 31st, none of those traits are present. Ken Amada remarks that they aren't sure how Makoto died exactly, and Aigis responds to this by saying there's no point in speculating on it. In the journey, though, she frequently talks about death, and a huge part of her social link is her coming to understand what exactly death means. At one point in October, in the context of wondering what might happen to her after the dark hour ends, Aigis says that she wants to continue to attend school and spend time with her friends. Here, though, she's doing the opposite. She's withdrawn from school and she intends on living in the laboratory. She even leaves the lounge early just before the Abyss appears, wanting to be alone instead of with her friends. She never does this in the journey, where she's either in the common areas with everybody or waiting to do something with Makoto. Aigis is a hollow shell of the person she once was. She can't sleep, and like Dante, she questions if she can really go on living like this. We will talk more about Aigis at great length when we get to her door into Colosseo Purgatorio. But for now, there's a ton of other allegories here at the beginning of the answer to the work that it's based on. In Inferno, Dante is overcome with despair and falls to his knees. It's at this point that he is met by a spirit, that of the Roman poet Virgil, the writer of the Aeneid. Virgil tells Dante that he has been sent to help him by serving as his guide through the afterlife, and that the only other option Dante has is to die. Virgil goes on to reveal that the person who sent him is none other than Beatrice, the woman Dante loved so dearly. Beatrice, in turn, was asked to speak to Virgil by a messenger of the Virgin Mary, Saint Lucia. Beatrice, Mary, and Lucia had grown so concerned at the miserable state that Dante is in that they pleaded to Virgil to help him rediscover his way in life. This is all reflected in the answer. Our first parallel here is that of Mary to Igor, and that might sound a bit odd at first, but it makes sense upon further examination. You see, in the Divine Comedy, Mary is a figure who intervenes to help Dante with her hands off and behind the scenes. She is responsible, through the intermediaries of St. Lucia and Beatrice, for sending Virgil to guide Dante, and Dante later visits her in her domain when he reaches the highest heaven. In that, we can see how Igor, the proprietor of the Velvet Room and someone who never intervenes directly in the lives of his guests, plays the role of Mary. Igor clearly takes an interest in Aigis. Think about the very first thing he says to her when she awakens in the Velvet Room after gaining the power of the wild card.
Ah, it appears we have a very rare guest indeed.
The way he talks to her is much different than how he talks to Makoto or to Yu Narukami in Persona 4. As an artificial being himself, Igor feels a kinship with Aigis. It makes sense then that he would be concerned for her and want to help her untie the knot of the abyss of time after seeing her reject and flee from what she once fought so hard for. Virgil is not Dante's only guide in his journey through the afterlife. There's two others. He is guided by Virgil for about 60% of the Divine Comedy through all of Hell in Inferno, and most of Purgatory in Purgatorio, before he's replaced by Beatrice towards the end of that second part. She guides Dante through the end of it and through most of the third part, Paradiso, before being replaced by a third guide for the final 3 cantos of the Divine Comedy, a saint named Bernard of Clairvaux. Dante chose to include Bernard as a guide for the final section of Paradiso in the Divine Comedy because that's when Mary appears in it, and Bernard was considered one of the Church's foremost experts on her in his lifetime. In Dante's imagining of heaven, Bernard serves as an attendant to Mary, just as Elizabeth serves as an attendant to Igor in the Velvet Room. Now, there is not much more to this allegory beyond that, but since the answer is all about grief, I want to talk about Elizabeth here because she, like Cease, is in grief over Makoto's death and says something very illuminating about the answer's gameplay that I want to discuss. Elizabeth tries to hide it, but her grief frequently slips out when she talks to Aigis. The requests Elizabeth gave Makoto helped her learn more about the world around her and helped the two of them grow closer to each other. It makes sense then that she would be in grief over his death. Those requests are also a key part of Makoto's growth throughout the journey. They involve asking the other members of Cease about their interests, exploring the different parts of Iwatodai, and getting to know all the different clubs and teachers at school. Through the requests, he comes to appreciate the world around him. The requests that she gives to Aigis are, as a result of the situation Aigis is in, solely focused on combat infusions, but assigning those requests is the only thing that she feels she can do right now to help Aigis. At one point, Elizabeth begins to remind Aigis of the importance of forming connections with others. She often says this to Makoto in the journey, but here she stops herself and says that Aigis has already done that. The answer is a story about grief. And when you're grieving, you're not hanging out with your friends. You're not doing things around town. You're not having fun. You're frozen in your grief and you feel completely and helplessly isolated. What the answer is doing is submerging you as the player in the same lonely, miserable mire that Aigis, the rest of Cease, and Elizabeth are all stuck in, following the death of someone so special to them and who you just spent 70 plus hours playing as. Makoto's death is the precipitating event for the answer. The specter of his memory hangs over everything Cease do in it. If you walk around the dorm, Aigis describes everything there with this air of finality, as though it has no purpose anymore. There's this miasma of grief emanating from everybody, contaminating everything within reach. Out of everyone in Cease, Aigis knew Makoto for the shortest amount of time. She encountered him when he was a child, fatefully, and they met again in July 2009. She was gone for all of December that year, and the relationship didn't really begin to bloom until the month after. She didn't speak to him in February, and he died at the start of March. Despite only knowing each other for a few months, Makoto had an unbelievably massive and profound impact on Aigis' life. In this way, he is the answer's Beatrice. Dante frequently uses the idea of Beatrice as a motivator to keep going into divine comedy throughout his journey through the afterlife, just as C's are motivated to learn more about the familiar shadowy figure that they see in the abyss of time. While it's not explicitly nor directly guiding them, their pursuit of that figure does lead them to the bottoms of the doors in the abyss, and, as we'll discuss when we get to those doors, for some of the characters to rediscover their purposes in life. In Purgatorio, at a pivotal moment we'll discuss more later on, Dante learning that he will see Beatrice again is what finally motivates him to push past a barrier that he's encountered there. This video, however, is about the answer, not Makoto. And while he is a constant presence in it, what the answer is about is his friends coping and living with the grief that comes with living without him. Appropriately then, the next character allegory is for the person probably best poised to do exactly that because of what she goes through in the journey. That messenger of Mary that Virgil talked about, St. Lucia, was a real person, Lucia of Syracuse. She was a Christian woman killed in Sicily in the 4th century during the final and deadliest persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire. Those are the only confirmed facts about her life, but there's many religious accounts about her death. And they all say the same thing. When the Roman soldiers came to take her to her execution, Lucia knelt down and prayed. The guards were physically unable to move her by any means, and eventually executed her where she knelt by slitting her throat, gouging out her eyes, and setting her on fire. Fuuka doesn't have a door in the Abyss of Time, but she's the character who best fits one of the messages at the very core of the Divine Comedy. Even if there's so much more to Dante's seminal work than its religious aspect, he very much believed in God and thought God omnipotent and incapable of error. So much medieval literature talks about how life is meant to be full of suffering in order to appease God, and that this is how you achieve salvation after death. But part of the Divine Comedy's enduring appeal is that Dante rejects that idea. The Divine Comedy posits that a life well lived is not one lived in misery, but one dedicated to making the world around you better, and that this is how you achieve salvation. If you dispense with the religious aspect of this idea, like the answer does, you can see how this core theme lines up with the themes in Persona 3. From the moment she joins C's, Fuuka fits this to a T. She thrives immediately and comes to realize over the course of her time in the Iwatodai dorm that she has the potential and the means to achieve whatever she wants in her life, regardless of what others might want for her. She actively searches for new ways to help her friends, like creating material on everyone's skill sets, offering suggestions in Tartarus, completing Natsuki Moriyama's notes, making new headphones for Makoto, and learning to cook. She strives to improve herself and the lives of the people she loves without ever compromising who she is as a person or what she believes in. To Dante, Lucia was representative of illuminative grace, the idea of light and hope in a bleak world. In Persona 3, Fuuka represents this perfectly. Both outside of Tartarus and within it, she's extremely insightful, encouraging, and optimistic. When Yukari visits Fuuka in her room, Fuuka correctly identifies that Yukari is a kind and caring person, no matter how hard Yukari tries to hide that. She's also very insightful about Natsuki, recognizing that she doesn't actually like being a bully and is instead seeking more meaningful connections. Through the context of her relationship with Natsuki, Fuuka also gives prescient insight into the importance of connections with others, regardless of how short those connections may last. She goes on to sum up one of the biggest messages of Persona 3 by saying that even if someone's not actively in your life anymore, they still have had an impact on you, and that means you're still connected. So much of her dialogue around the dorm, especially during the journey's darker moments, is her being optimistic, positive, and encouraging. She always tries to see the brighter side of things and to be a positive presence to her friends, even when things look their bleakest. When she's navigating inside Tartarus, she shines light on enemy weaknesses, raises awareness of the health and status of party members, and helps them find their way forward. She is the light and hope in the dark hour. Fuuka serves this role in the answer also. She's obviously still sees as navigator as they explore the abyss of time, but the things that she does outside of it are illuminative as well. Fuuka offers the first hint about what Metis might truly be when she notices that Metis can use her Gia mode now, and Aigis can't. She helps Aigis directly by installing her equipment upgrades and immediately notices that the mysterious figure they see in the Abyss of Time is Makoto, or at least something representative of him, even if she doesn't say that to the others. This illuminative grace that Dante associates with Lucia comes up twice in the Divine Comedy, and both of those occurrences are reflected in the answer. The first manifestation of it is when Lucia convinces Beatrice to plead to Virgil at the beginning of Inferno. Fuuka's plea to Aigis to help after the Abyss of Time and Metis appear helps set in motion the events of the answer, and obviously save the lives of everyone in the dorm. The second manifestation happens in Purgatorio, when Lucia helps Dante reach a pivotal destination in Purgatory. In the journey, Fuuka has a habit of wanting to please everybody. She wants people to like her and says she never gave much thought to what she wants for herself. Her social link is about her coming to realize that she does not need to make everyone happy and instead needs to live for herself. The answer builds upon this realization that she's made. Fuuka makes a choice of who to help as the events of the answer's story reach their climax. She makes that choice in the same destination Lucia helps Dante reach. There is one more connection between characters at the beginnings of the answer and Inferno. You might have figured it out for yourself already, but I wanted to leave it for last because it's going to come up again later, and it's very, very important. As Aigis is Dante, Metis, her self-appointed guide and sister, is Virgil. In her role as Aigis' guide, Metis explains to her and to the rest of SEAS the situation they're in, its stakes, and why things happen, just as Virgil explains to Dante the things he sees during their journey together through Hell and Purgatory. There's several reasons that Dante the writer chose Virgil to guide his fictional self through the afterlife. He felt Virgil represented philosophical virtue and poetic brilliance, things that Dante, as a philosopher and poet himself, valued massively. Virgil also wrote about the underworld in the Aeneid, adding a level of literary relevance to this choice. Virgil, as a guide, is designed to appeal to Dante in the Divine Comedy. Likewise, Metis is meant to appeal to Aigis. We can see this reinforced in a scene after Akihiko Sanada's door in the Abyss of Time, and a scene that triggers after that one when you return to the dorm. These doors are doors to the past, and after we see the past behind Akihiko's door, which takes place inside a school, Metis seems fascinated by the location. She is showing the same interest in school that Aigis did before she enrolled at Gekkan. When Aigis reveals to Metis that she's dropping out of school, Metis is shocked at this, and pushes back.
Huh? You won't? But why? Everyone else is going. I thought you liked being with your friends.
After this scene, if you've also completed the first Persona fusion request from Elizabeth, you'll find Metis at the mall wearing a school uniform. Aigis puts hers on as well, and Metis delights at the opportunity to be able to spend time with her sister while wearing their uniforms together. Aigis was once so outgoing, has withdrawn from that in her grief, and these scenes with Metis are indicative of what the answer is ultimately about. Learning to live again following the death of someone so close to you. Through Metis, we're seeing how excited Aigis used to be about attending school and how much she loved spending time with her friends. And we're seeing her challenge Aigis on this retreat that she's made from that joy in an appeal to the person Aigis once was and the person that she can be again. Metis is clearly Aigis' shadow self, even if that attribution is never explicitly given to her. Shadow selves are the parts of people that they're pushing away or hiding, and that's exactly what Aigis is doing in an attempt to escape the crushing grief she feels over Makoto's death. In Persona 4 and Persona 4 Arena, the characters fight someone's shadow self before that person accepts it, and here, Aigis does fight Metis, but she doesn't accept her afterward.
If you continue to act this way, we'll have to go on without you.
Metis isn't going to come up again for quite some time. This is a long video, but I'd like it if you could keep in mind that she's an allegory for Virgil and that she's meant to appeal to Aigis. These things are both extremely important because, in researching these connections between the Divine Comedy and the Answer, I came to realize that there is more to Metis than just being Aigis' shadow. For it to make sense, though, I have to talk about what the doors Caesar are about to enter represent. The Answer has another inversion here, as we enter the Abyss of Time, and this time it's inverting something from the journey. It's quite an overt and literal inversion as well, because after previously ascending up Tartarus, Caesar now descending down the Abyss of Time. This will eventually become an inversion of the Divine Comedy too, and it's quite a significant one that's intricately linked to the Answer's story, but like most of that story, it's not going to be revealed until much closer to the end. We've just covered Inferno's first two cantos. Both of them take place in the living world, not the afterlife. It's in the third canto that Dante and Virgil begin their actual descent. We too are now about to enter hell. It will help now then to explain how Dante's hell is organized. Hell is a massive funnel-shaped cavern underneath the surface of the earth, and is organized into 9 descending circles. Each of those circles is smaller than the one above it, and some of them are organized into smaller subsections of varying designs. The first is Limbo, a false heaven for people who lived virtuous lives, but without ever accepting God. Beyond that, a sinner is placed into whichever circle of hell matches their gravest sin in life. The next 6 circles share their name with the sin punished within them. Those are, in order, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, and violence. Basically, the more wicked your sin in life was, the lower in hell you go. Many people are guilty of lust, for example, but far fewer are guilty of murder, which is punished in the circle of violence. Once someone is sentenced to their circle in hell, they're punished there with what Dante called contrapasso. Contrapasso is punishment by a process resembling or contrasting with the sin. So, for example, in violence, warmongers are in a river of boiling blood because they wallowed in blood during their lives. The Answer skips all 7 of those circles, though, and instead places C's at the most miserable depths of hell, where the 2 gravest sins, interlinked, are punished. Dante's 8th and penultimate circle of hell, and therefore the place of punishment for what he felt was the 2nd gravest sin someone could commit, is reserved for a type of betrayal. It is reserved for corrupt merchants, politicians, con artists, clergy, and sorcerers, people who use their platforms to deceive others for power or money. This is where those who betrayed people they don't know suffer. Dante makes a point to mention that this circle, unlike the ones above, has a name. It does not share its name with its sin. It's not gluttony. It's not heresy. This place has been named by people because it must be a place so wicked people talk about it. This is a place called Malebolge. Dante believed that what truly allows us to live and what makes us people as opposed to beasts is our ability to form and foster connections with others. He believed that this was what it meant to make that active effort to live. To betray those relationships, he believed, was a sin unique to people and therefore is something far, far worse than other sins. After reaching the ends of each of the 6 doors following this one, we see the past of someone from Seas, but here, Seas emerge into Paulownia Mall, where they are greeted by Officer Kurosawa. Even though Kurosawa is not a member of Seas, nor fully aware of what they're doing, he wants them to succeed and he helps them do so. All he knows is that their mission is important and he trusts them to accomplish it. The same is true for the woman who runs the antique store, even if she knows more about what's going on than Kurosawa does. She trusts Makoto and she trusts Seas to end the Dark Hour and is helping them do so. But now, because of his death, the Seas feel as though they have betrayed the trust that these people placed in them. They feel that the time and effort that these people spent helping them has been wasted. Malebolge, in the answer, is not a commentary about the merchants, the sorcerers, the politicians who are punished there in Inferno. In life, people trusted Malebolge's condemned, despite that trust not being reciprocated, and it was betrayed. Seas feel as though they are Malebolge's condemned by failing the people at the mall who went out of their way to help Makoto. After leaving the mall and returning to the dorm, a door appears that lets you go back to the mall anytime you want. As revealed at the end of the answer, this is a door to what Seas need, even if it never has the gems you need for crafting behind it. They need to be able to get supplies to help them explore the Abyss of Time, and while we have a ways to go before we get to this point, it will eventually become their means to finding the answer they've been searching for. At the beginning of Inferno, Dante talks about how the journey he's about to undergo is akin to a battle. Virgil attempts to motivate Dante in Malebolge by saying that Dante is able to overcome any battle that he might face. This idea of battle is quite fitting for the answer, as Metis and Seas phrase what they're about to do in the same way. Aigis is adorned in combat armor for her safety, and Seas voice their various thoughts over having to go back and fight again. And here in Malebolge, they do in fact battle against shadows. Earlier, I talked about why the answer doesn't have social links or activities to do around town, and that is one of the most common criticisms of this epilogue. Another common criticism of it is one interlinked to the first, that it's a slog to play. It's just combat over and over with very little to break it up, even in Reload when they do add activities that you can do up in the dorm with Seas. Persona 3 is a game extraordinarily and holistically devoted to the story that it wants to tell and the themes that come with that story. Every single component of the journey is built around Makoto coming to appreciate and eventually cherish the world around him and the people in it, and accepting that it's something worth dying for to save. His early social links are full of dialogue where he placates his friends, but as those links progress, and in later social links, he's much more assertive and supportive, emerging from a depressive cocoon to become a genuinely caring and meaningful friend. Persona 3 is such a slow burn because it is willing to forego more engaging content earlier on in its story as a way to illustrate the growth of its protagonist and to add impact to the things that do happen later on in the game. Accordingly, in the answer, Seas are all reeling from his death, and no one is more so than Aigis. In her grief, as I mentioned earlier, she's withdrawn from school, fled from her relationships with her friends, and as a result, is a shell of the person that she once was. Why would she be hanging out with her friends? Why would she be going to Hagakure or Wild Duck? You, the player, are experiencing that isolation that she feels in her grief. And that interlinked second criticism that this is grueling to play is addressed in the same way. Working through grief is like a battle. It's a slog. It's fucking miserable. It's grueling. It's not linear. It's supposed to be agonizing. You, the player, are experiencing that same slog. You are trapped in the same time loop they are, experiencing the same hell they are. Whether or not you think this makes it good is just a matter of opinion. But I personally believe that Persona 3's willingness to sacrifice more palatable gameplay in order to drive home its message is what makes it as special as it is. If the second worst sin you can commit is betraying people you don't know, then logically the worst is betraying people you do. This sin is punished in the 4 sections of Hell's Terminus, a massive frozen lake with its sinners encased in ice, unable to escape the frigid winds that barrage them. Like Malebolge above it, this circle also has a name, but it's not named for its topography. Appropriately for the answer's exploration of a grief so chilling that it has frozen time, this place is called Cocytus, the ancient Greek word for lamentation. It is here in Cocytus where we begin to see the pasts of the members of SEAS. Throughout the journey, as a result of his circumstances, Ken often tries to act much older than he is. He tries things that he thinks adults like coffee and detective dramas, but despite his best efforts to hide it, he is 10. And he lets this slip out when his favorite show, Neo Featherman, or something else that he finds cool, comes up. Ken also acts older than his age in much more serious ways. For example, after Mitsuru's father is murdered, Ken goes to the bar Kei Sara Sara in order to buy a blend of tea for Mitsuru in the hopes that it'll cheer her up. He's also very inquisitive about things. He asks Makoto what exams and having a job are both like, and he tries to study with him and Aigis to get some insight into the things they study and how they go about it, even if Aigis might not be the best example for how to study. In the answer, Ken gets a genuine opportunity to be mature beyond his age, and he really seizes it. He's inquisitive about the situation they find themselves in and makes several astute remarks about their circumstances. For example, he's the first to suspect there's something more to what's going on than simply shadows, and he's the first to notice that Yukari is really not doing okay when she returns to the dorm. He also deduces that personas are shadows before Metis tells them this fact much later on. The sin punished in Cocytus is the betrayal of bonds, and in trying to kill Shinji Aragaki back in October, Ken is explicitly committing that betrayal, so perhaps it's fitting that his past is the first one we explore. We see how he's treated by the police after his mother's death, and how this causes him to swear revenge for it. You can certainly argue that it's not Shinji's fault, or that the Kirijo group bears some responsibility for what's happened, but regardless, Shinji feels responsible for the misfortune that has befallen Ken. The impetus for Shinji to finally rejoin SEAS is him learning that Ken has a persona and is going to fight with it. What happened on October 4th is not Ken's fault, and he couldn't have known that Takaya would show up. But Ken did inadvertently create the opportunity for things to happen through his naivety. It is through Shinji's final words and Ken's subsequent acceptance of the fact that he is not alone that Ken gains resolve that he carries with him even through the grief and trauma of the answer. Shinji's murder is the first time we see SEAS dealing with grief. We know that some of these characters have experienced loss in their pasts, but it was when they were children, and it's not something that's shown to us. Following his murder, Fuuka wants to find a way to help Ken. Akihiko, someone who's normally so stoic, breaks down at Shinji's memorial. Junpei Iori gets angry at the memorial service, yelling at a classmate whom he feels isn't respecting Shinji's memory. Mitsuru acts quite maturely, becoming nostalgic and helping guide the others through this grief. Yukari, someone who is normally so decisive and so eager to help others, is instead frozen, discouraging Fuuka from going to look for Ken. Aigis is grappling with how she should feel about this situation that's so new to her in such a horrifying way. The way these characters react to Makoto's death is paralleled in all that. We already talked earlier about how Fuuka reacts to it. She's able to apply and build on the growth she's already made in order to help others through their grief. And here, as we proceed into Cocytus' subsections, we'll see how the reactions the other characters had to Shinji's murder come back up. Like I said in Malebolge, SEAS feel they've failed by letting Makoto die, even if there was nothing they could have done to save him. In Cocytus, we have a physical metaphor for these feelings of failure. Cocytus literally means lamentation, and the punishment in Cocytus is being frozen in ice, fitting for SEAS, frozen in that lamentation. We've already explored how SEAS feel as though they've betrayed the trust of people who helped them in their mission, but now, with the next 3 doors, we'll be exploring why individual characters feel as though they've betrayed things much dearer to them. Even if some of the footage I'm using is from the older versions of Persona 3 and from the movies, which, by the way, are definitely worth your time to watch, the events I'm discussing are specifically from Persona 3 Reload. This is because Reload adds a ton of depth to an already fantastically rich set of characters, and one of the best examples of how is found in Akihiko's linked episodes. It becomes clear through those linked episodes that Seize is something incredibly dear to Akihiko. His friends in the Iwatodai dorm are like his family, and he relishes the chance to have something to fight for and to protect people he loves. For Akihiko, this idea of protection takes the guise of near endless exercise. He takes every opportunity he gets to exercise, and he does so in order to become stronger to protect people. What he comes to learn, though, over the course of the story is that this physical, tangible idea of strength is not how you protect people, nor what the strength he's searching for actually is. In his third linked episode, he and Makoto cook pancakes for the rest of Seize.
It's pancake party time, as they say.
And this scene gives us an amazing level of insight into who Akihiko is. This is a very caring thing that he does, and we can see that he genuinely does not want praise for doing it. He plays off making so many as a mistake, but as he admits afterwards, it was intentional. He talks about how pancakes would cheer his late sister Miki up when she was sad, and here, 2 weeks after Shinji's death, he hopes it will do the same for his found family. Sharing food is something you do with your family, and he does this in his previous linked episode too. In that one, he receives a care package from his foster parents and shares it all with the people he lives with, as you would with your siblings. Part of why Akihiko doesn't want praise for these things that are genuinely deserving of that praise is because he is a naturally caring person, and these things are manifestations of that. To him, it's second nature, and he doesn't see the point in being praised for it. Another reason why, though, is that Akihiko struggles greatly with self-worth. He talks about how his sister felt he was strong and kind, but he can't grasp why. He doesn't know what it means because it's something that comes naturally to him. His interest in boxing and exercise then comes from trying to find an answer to what that strength is, even though there is never going to be an answer through protein powder and powerlifting. What Akihiko comes to realize across the course of the journey is that protecting people is something done through acts of kindness and love. Acts of kindness and love, like sharing your food or cooking everyone pancakes. In the journey, Akihiko is almost always calm and stoic. He doesn't let his fame from his boxing exploits get to his head, and he doesn't pay any mind to his countless fans. He's not fazed by having to fight the men from the Port Island outskirts in his linked episodes, and following Mitsuru's father's murder, he's able to take up a mantle of leadership while she's away grieving. When Aigis begs Makoto to kill Ryoji, Akihiko calmly tells her that he's not worried about dying, and that Seize are instead focusing on their futures. However, at Shinji's memorial shrine, this stoicism falters, and Akihiko realizes that this desire to get stronger has ultimately left him feeling alone, and as though it was all for naught. This feeling also comes up when he talks about Miki, and it comes up in the answer. Before we even see or hear Akihiko, we see how Makoto's death has affected him. Akihiko only shows up for the same reason Yukari does, because he was asked to by Mitsuru. When he does arrive, he has a much shorter temper and often reacts to things with frustration and anger. He also frequently lashes out at Metis. There are two reasons for this. Akihiko views all of Seize as his family, and to him, Metis is an interloper, intruding on the family's grief. The other reason is in who Metis is, or at least in who Metis says she is. Aigis' sister. Imagine how it must feel to have lost someone who is like a sibling to you, yet again, and then to have someone show up talking about how wonderful it is to be able to spend time with theirs. Akihiko has retreated back into this habit of training to become stronger, without any real idea of what that means or how to show it. From his grieving point of view, Akihiko has betrayed his found family's trust in him by not being strong enough to save all of them. It is fitting then that Akihiko's grief over the death of someone who was like a brother to him is shown behind the door Cana. This first section of Cocytus is named for Cain, who murdered his brother Abel as depicted in the book of Genesis. Cana is reserved for those who betrayed their family. After Seize view Akihiko's past, Mitsuru specifically points out that she didn't want to appeal to a sense of justice in him, because she knows he doesn't care about that. Mitsuru knew that Akihiko wanted a purpose in life, and that this was what would provide it. Akihiko cares about doing the right thing, but on a much more personal level than on this grand scale. tying back into the idea of wanting to protect the people who he loves. While Akihiko fights to protect people he cares about, Junpei sees himself as the hero of his own story, someone out to save the world. This is a huge part of his character arc in the game. He runs on ahead during the second full moon event and has to be rescued by Makoto and Yukari. He frequently asks to be made leader, and in July, after that month's full moon event, he gets mad at Makoto because he feels Makoto is stealing the spotlight. He often talks about what C's do in a very fantastical way. In his first linked episode, for example, he talks to Makoto about needing to come up with special attacks, and a lot of his dialogue around the dorm shows she does not take this situation as seriously as the others. He treats things like they're a video game or a manga. Junpei is someone desperately searching for a purpose. He reaches out to Makoto at the beginning of the school year because he hopes that helping a transfer student get acclimated to his new surroundings will be something purposeful, and it is, but not quite how he expects. We can see this come up again when Aigis joins C's. It is always presented for laughs with her, but she frequently talks about how Junpei is trying to teach her to speak less robotically and more like a person, and she often repeats things he says.
Man.
He does these things because he's a kind person searching for a purpose, even if he's not particularly capable of conveying them in a serious way. Yukari is so hard on him because, well, he does annoy her, but also because she can see what Junpei is capable of and doesn't want to see him waste it. She has quite a few lines of idle dialogue where she wishes Junpei would try harder at things, and she also talks about how happy she is for him once his relationship with Chidori begins to blossom in the fall. Their relationship is ultimately what helps Junpei grow and mature as a person. Throughout the summer, he's grappling with this lack of purpose, and right before they meet, he's saying to himself that the world feels very boring. As he continues talking to her outside of Port Island Station, he reveals to her he is in C's and then lies about his role in it in an attempt to impress her, and this ultimately winds up backfiring on him and putting him in danger. In those interactions, though, we can see how actually caring of a person he is when he notices Chidori is bleeding. The way he reacts to this is not in this fantastical or immature way, but by stressing the seriousness of it and trying to help dress the wound. Then, when he sees her again, by simply asking her how her hand is doing. After Chidori is hospitalized, we can see this caring side of Junpei emerge even further. Mitsuru and Akihiko struggle to talk to her because they view her as the enemy, but Junpei is able to connect with her by talking to her as someone who simply sees her as a person and as someone who cares about her. He confides to her here that he feels like he's just acting like a hero and that he doesn't have a good reason to live. Their relationship helps him realize that he does have a reason, though, the people in his life, and that he has to care for them in order for them and their relationships to blossom. His persona, fusing with Chidori's to form Trismegistus, I believe, is representative of him discarding what he thinks heroism is and recognizing what it really is and what it really costs. Depending on the choices you make, that cost may not be Chidori's life, but if it's not, it is her memories of Junpei, and she did what she did expecting to die anyway. Makoto is present for this just as he was when Shinji died, and him seeing how far these people were willing to go and the impact of their sacrifices made on the people in their lives plays no small part in shaping his resolve to make his own sacrifice at the end of January. And then, at the end of March, we can see how that sacrifice has affected Junpei. He's dissatisfied with the state of the world. He comments that he sees people goofing off like nothing else matters, and that these toxic ideas never left their heads. He then asks if that's the kind of world they almost died to protect. He's regressed back into this mindset of false heroism. He's disappointed that it doesn't seem like anyone cares about what C's did and what Makoto died for. The point of being a hero, though, is fighting for justice, not for praise. Here, however, he's once again concerned with seeing a tangible reward for it, even though, like when Akihiko talks about protecting people, he doesn't know what that looks like. It's a vague notion instead of anything concrete, and he completely misses the fact that goofing off is possible only because C's did defeat Nyx back in January. His best friend's death has ultimately left Junpei much more melancholic. Throughout the answer, he takes things much more seriously than he does through the journey, and for the duration of the epilogue, he's generally much more contemplative and thoughtful. After the events at the bottom of the seventh door of the Abyss of Time, each member of SEES gets a key, and the unification of these keys is what will allow them to break the time loop they're frozen in. These keys are something from the Divine Comedy, and when we get to Colosseo Purgatorio, you'll come to see how exactly. For now, though, we're still talking about the dorm's resident ace detective. As SEES begin to split over the decision they have to make with these keys, Junpei serves as a voice of reason, correctly pointing out that yelling at each other isn't going to solve anything. This is a stark inversion to his character in Journey, where Junpei often tries to shift blame from himself, and where he even lashes out at Makoto in December over the decision they have to make then. Once inside Colosseo Purgatorio, Junpei even notes that the problem is not with the decision they have to make, but with themselves. In his grief, Junpei feels as though he has let down not just SEES, but all of Japan, all of the world, by failing to save Makoto, and in this, the symbolism of Antenora emerges. Cocytus' second part is named for Antenor, a Trojan counselor who opened Troy's gates to the Greeks during the Trojan War in exchange for having his house spared. This is where those who betrayed their country are frozen as punishment for that sin. We also see Koromaru's past in Antenora, and it actually fits perfectly for him too, even if his character is obviously not as fleshed out anywhere near as much as the others. Koromaru is a dog, and it's no stretch to say that for a dog, their world is the people they live with who care for them and who are in turn protected by them. After the priest he lived with at the shrine died in early 2009, Koromaru felt as though he'd failed to protect him. Through defending the shrine from a shadow in the summer and through his time in SEES, he rediscovered a sense of purpose with his new family. As a dog, he is obviously different from the rest of SEES, but they still embrace him and let him take an equal role in their mission to end the Dark Hour. Koromaru feels then as though he too has failed the world as he knows it by failing to save Makoto. Dante and Virgil's journey through Cana and Antenora is very brief, and their time in each is almost blurred together. All four types of betrayal in Cocytus are connected to each other, but betrayals of family and of the state are the ones that are most interlinked. This is in line with an idea that has existed since ancient times and across cultures, one that I by no means endorse and that is largely problematic and outdated now and often brought up by right-wing politicians and pundits, that the family is a model for the state. Aristotle, someone who Dante loved, described domestic relationships with allegories to different forms of government, while Confucius believed that as a nation should be subservient to its king, a household should be subservient to its patriarch. Most people generally can't choose their family nor where they're raised, and that's especially true if you're a teenager, but you can choose the people you let into your life. And that is what comes next in our exploration of grief. The penultimate section of Cocytus is Ptolemaea, named for Ptolemy, an official in the city of Jericho who invited a priest and his sons into his home and then murdered them. Ptolemaea, then, is where people who betrayed guests are punished. To phrase this in a way more fitting to who and what we are talking about, though, this is the place in hell reserved for those who betrayed people they had a responsibility to care for. Mitsuru, as the head of SEES, its first and its oldest member, feels responsible for the well-being of the rest of the group and wants to protect them all from the burdens and trauma she bears. Before Makoto awakens to the power of the wildcard, both Mitsuru and Yukari tell him not to go out at night, but in significantly different ways. Yukari just says he should go to bed, but Mitsuru makes an active point of saying he should stay in for his own safety. This achieves the effect of making her come off as overbearing, yes, but as we come to see throughout the course of the year, she genuinely cares about not only his safety, but the safety of everyone else in SEES. She often asks Makoto how he's handling the events that occur and how he's coping with the burden that has been thrust upon him. This is seen in much of her dialogue around the dorm and when Makoto has tea with her. When she is serving as Caesar's navigator, she makes a habit of checking in on Junpei, Akihiko, and Yukari during their time in Tartarus. She genuinely cares about her friends, wants to keep them safe, and wants to make sure that they are prepared for whatever they may encounter. You can see how anxious Mitsuru gets during the June full moon when seas are too far up for her to reach them with her limited navigational capacity. Once she joins the party, she points out that she is far more comfortable on the front lines, where she is able to contribute directly. Unfortunately, that desire to protect her friends often manifests itself as withholding information from them. Mitsuru hides from everybody that she knows the Kirijo group is responsible for the Dark Hour, and that her grandfather brought it about out of desire for power. By no means is this her fault, and she had absolutely no way of knowing what could have happened on October 4th, but by not telling the others about how Ken's mother died, she indirectly contributes to Shinji's death. Once he rejoins Seas after learning Ken is joined, keeping the others in the dark about those events prevents them from helping Ken work through the feelings he had about what happened 2 years ago, and they're also unable to intervene sooner that night in October. She did this out of desire to protect Shinji from more grief and trauma over what happened, and that desire to spare others from pain is why she hid the origin of the Dark Hour from them. But what Mitsuru ultimately comes to learn is that trusting and confiding in people is necessary for meaningful relationships to bloom. She overextends herself in her desire to keep others safe, and after her father's murder, this ultimately leads to her becoming hopelessly despondent. After this, Mitsuru, someone who is so used to carrying the weight of the world on her own, needs someone else to help her see that she is not alone, and to help her realize what she is worth. Mitsuru is desperate to try things that she perceives as normal, like going clothes shopping or eating ramen, burgers, and takoyaki. In her dorm video, she talks about buying a fashion magazine after seeing Yukari read it, and in January, she has come to trust Yukari enough to ask her to go shopping with her. In her social link, she trusts Makoto to take her to try those aforementioned foods, and, in its rank 5, reveals to him riding her motorcycle is a form of rebellion against the structured life that had been built for her. So much agency has been taken from Mitsuru in her life, and this is an opportunity for her to exercise a modicum of it. She was trained from childhood as a weapon to fight shadows, she was in an arranged marriage, and she was forced to carry the sins of her family's company for a large part of her life. Her motorcycle is her way of fighting back against the isolation she feels as a result of the duty her family has forced upon her. This goes beyond rebellion, though. She has a genuine interest in mechanics. She talks about tinkering with her motorcycle, and she's actually doing this at times when you see her with it. She also mentions how she has shown up to board meetings covered in oil because she didn't have time to change after working on her bike. In the answer, when Aigis collapses after she saves Mitsuru and the others present from Metis, Mitsuru is the one who actually installs that armor on her. However, the reason Mitsuru and the others even need saving at all ties into her grief over Makoto's death. Sometime between Makoto's passing and March 31st, Mitsuru had collected everyone's evokers, and this shows how his death has caused her to regress. She's gone back into this habit of hiding uncomfortable things from her friends to protect them from what she believes might hurt them, in this case the memories the evokers trigger. By doing this though, she leaves herself, Fuuka, Ken, Koromaru, and Junpei unable to defend themselves against Metis when she arrives, and they need Aigis, with her integrated evoker, to rescue them. Before that happens though, there is another example of how her grief is affecting her. When Aigis says she'll be moving back into the lab, and the others are surprised to hear that, it is Mitsuru who steps in and breaks the news that Aigis is dropping out of school. Mitsuru places so much emphasis on academics, and that, coupled with the hollow platitude she justifies this with, makes it clear she disagrees with Aigis' decision, but is simply going along with it to avoid anyone being hurt over it. I'll discuss this more shortly, but Mitsuru had previously spoken about how much Aigis has grown as a person. Here, though, she is enabling Aigis' retreat from that very same growth Mitsuru was once so proud to have seen. However, once Aigis reawakens, Mitsuru shows the growth she's undergone over the past year and the maturity that she responded to Shinji's death with. Instead of hiding things from Seas, she is transparent with them about what she's doing. She trusts her friends to go through the abyss of time without her initially so that she can look more into its origins. And, crucially, she places a massive amount of trust in Aigis by appointing her as their leader. Mitsuru's growth is further shown in something that I desperately wish the game explored more, her relationship with Aigis. In July, when Aigis first joins Seas, Mitsuru comments that she is a souvenir from Yakushima. However, at the summer festival a few weeks later with the two of them, it is clear how Mitsuru's perception has grown since then. She is overbearing toward Aigis here, but she talks to her like she is a person, and in that scene, she actively encourages Aigis' inquisitiveness and desire to learn more about the world, while positively reinforcing the experiences that Aigis has at the festival. Come December, Mitsuru's attitude toward Aigis has evolved even further. On the 1st, she remarks how it's painful hearing Aigis say that as a machine, she is replaceable, and just before Aigis returns from the lab later in the month, Mitsuru says she values Aigis and that she made sure Aigis was given the utmost care. On the 30th, when Aigis does return, Mitsuru tells her that living is about being willing to change, and points out to Aigis that what this means is Aigis is alive because she has changed so much by being with her friends. Mitsuru and Aigis are really quite similar people. They were both, in some sense of the word, weapons used by the Kirijo group to fight shadows. After awakening to her persona abilities as a child, Mitsuru was raised to fight them, and Aigis was literally built to do so. They are both extremely out of touch with the world as a result of this, but actively make an effort to learn more about it and experience more of it. This forms a key tenet of their relationships with not just Makoto, but everyone in Seas. The growth of her relationship with Aigis and the things they have in common shape how Mitsuru treats her in the answer. By appointing Aigis as their leader, Mitsuru is trusting her to take on the bulk of responsibility instead of attempting to carry all the weight by herself. This leaves Mitsuru to focus on things that she is capable of doing. At the beginning, this is simply researching more about the Abyss of Time, but it becomes clear very quickly that what Mitsuru is really focused on is helping Yukari. Yukari confronting Mitsuru on the riverbank in Kyoto is what helps Mitsuru realize what she is worth and that she is not alone. Mitsuru's reason for doing any of this, as Yukari says, was to protect her father, and following his death, she has completely lost any sense of purpose. She even remarks in mid-November that she can't find a reason to live. It is Yukari who helps Mitsuru accept that protecting someone is about working together with them, and that together they can fight onward. This is something that brings the two of them much closer to each other, and because of it, Mitsuru is in a far better place mentally in the answer than she was before this. However, she still struggles with expressing herself and says to Junpei at one point that comforting people is not her strong suit. What Mitsuru knows, though, is that Yukari desperately needs the very same thing Mitsuru needed back in November. Someone to help her realize what she is worth and that she is not alone. So much of Mitsuru's dialogue in the answer is either obliquely referencing or explicitly talking about Yukari. When she rejoins the party after the door Cocytus, her dialogue as you explore the remaining doors is generally centered around one of two things. She often expresses something akin to happiness about being able to work with everyone again, even if it's under these circumstances. Much like she did after Shinji died, Mitsuru is responding to her grief with a sense of nostalgia. This time, though, she's specifically alluding to Akihiko and to Yukari, even if she isn't saying this to them outright. They're the two people in Siege she is the closest to, and the two people that weren't at the dorm until Mitsuru asked them to come back. They're also the two people outwardly handling the events around them the worst, and, aside from Aigis, the two who are most impacted by Makoto's death. In addition to that, Mitsuru often expresses a great deal of concern. She's concerned about the burden that has been thrust upon Aigis and talks to her in a similar way she talked to Makoto about the very same burden. However, unlike with Makoto, Mitsuru is also concerned about whether or not she is being helpful. She outright asks Aigis this at one point and then makes an oblique reference to wanting to help Yukari as well. When you're back up in the dorm, there are so many lines of dialogue about how concerned she is about Yukari and how Mitsuru is searching for a way to reach out to her. At the start of the answer, Mitsuru steps in to speak for Aigis in an attempt to spare everyone's feelings about Aigis dropping out of school. As the events of The Answer approach their climax, and Seas are discussing what to do with the keys they have just received, Mitsuru prompts Yukari for her thoughts on it. Yukari is militant in her desire to go back to the past, and this is where Mitsuru finds the answer she has been searching for this whole time. Here, like when she fought back against her structured life by rejecting her arranged marriage, Mitsuru makes a decision for herself. Despite the rest of Seas being either openly uncomfortable with what Yukari wants to do or outright opposed to it, Mitsuru chooses to stand with her, the person she knows needs her love and support the most right now. She has finally found an opportunity to help this person who helped her when she needed it the most, and she leaps upon it by not speaking for Yukari like she did for Aigis, but by standing with her and helping her see she is not alone in her grief. Mitsuru never gives her actual thoughts on the choice Yukari wants to make, because it is one she obviously disagrees with. What she knows, though, is that in order to help Yukari, Yukari must first fall, and when she does, someone has to be there to catch her. At Dante's nadir of sin, at the very bottom of Cocytus and the core of the world, with its sinners encased in ice from head to toe, hopeless and wordless, their bodies contorted, lays Judeca. Named for Judas, this is the place of punishment for the gravest of all sins, and the place in hell where Satan himself resides. The Apostle Judas came up earlier in this video. It was his betrayal of Christ on the Wednesday before Christ's crucifixion that is being used in the date of the answer as a metaphor for Caesar's grief, and it is true that Makoto is obviously a messianic figure, but the rest of Seas are not playing the role of his apostles. I think it's actually very, very unfair to describe his relationships with his friends using that allegory, because what it implies is that they are not equal and that he was above them in some way. One of the main themes in Persona 3 is agency. So much of this game is about taking agency over your own life and control over the decisions that you make in it. This is shown in so many social links throughout the game, and not just in the ones with Seas. It's also present in all of the characters' persona evolutions. All of them except Aigis' and Junpei's happen when Makoto is not there, and theirs happen when all of Seas are present. This game's story is not one where you as the player show up and fix everyone. It's one about Makoto and his friends helping each other grow and heal in the face of a horrifying and bleak situation. This theme of agency is so critical to the story that Atlus wanted to tell in Persona 3 that it is actually the reason behind what's probably the biggest criticism of the original 2006 release and of FES, which includes the first version of The Answer. Not being able to control your party members was certainly a controversial choice on Atlus's part. It was also a change from the previous 3 Persona games. You could control your party in Persona 1 and both of the games that make up Persona 2. In an interview with the British magazine Play ahead of Persona 4's Western release, Katsura Hashino, the director and producer of both games, said that by having Persona 3's party members controlled by AI, their personalities and characteristics shine through more. For example, Yukari is a deeply loving and compassionate person, and Atlus chose to express this by having her being the one to heal you, without you choosing to have her do so. The general consensus is that yes, this idea did not come off how they intended, but it exists for the same reason the early parts of the journey are slow, and the same reason the answer is solely combat without any social links. This willingness to again sacrifice more palatable aspects of gameplay in order to bring across the themes of their story shows just how committed to those themes they were. I say this all for 2 reasons. One, I think Persona 3 is a genuine narrative masterpiece, and I want that to be clear in this video, but also because, with all of that said, and to bring it back to the Divine Comedy, the sin punished in Judeca does not apply to Yukari. It is the betrayal of masters and benefactors, which is why it's named after Judas, because that is what he did. But Makoto was not her master, he was not her benefactor. To say that would be insulting to Yukari as a character, and completely undermine this idea of agency that is so essential to the very essence of Persona 3. One of the core messages of the Divine Comedy is that anything and everything we do, good or bad, is driven by love. And this is largely what Dante explores in its second part, Purgatorio, and love is used broadly. Dante talks about loving God, yes, but it's also about loving things like power, loving a place like your country or your town, or loving people. And no one in Persona 3 exemplifies this idea that love is at the core of all of our actions better than Yukari. You can see how genuinely caring of a person Yukari is almost, but not quite immediately in the journey, when she shows Makoto to his room his first night in the dorm, then the morning after, takes him to school. She visits Makoto in the hospital every day after he collapses, and after he's discharged, she walks him home from school. It becomes clear not long after the early weeks of the game that Yukari is the beating heart of SEES. The events of Persona 3 and the answer are simply not possible without her. Without Yukari's relentless pursuit of the truth behind the ghost story in June, they wouldn't have been able to save Fuuka. And without Fuuka, they wouldn't have been able to progress any further up Tartarus. Yukari then goes out of her way to welcome Fuuka when she moves in, and shows here that her concern about Fuuka joining is rooted in genuine care for her, instead of the distrust for Mitsuru that she couches it in when she talks to Makoto about it. Because of her very warranted hatred of the Kirijo group, Yukari directs a lot of apprehension and anger towards the representation of the company most accessible to her, Mitsuru. Her distrust of Mitsuru is present from the beginning of the story, but it really begins to simmer in June when she talks about it constantly. And it finally boils over in July when she confronts Mitsuru in front of the rest of SEES about the things she and the Kirijo group have been hiding from them. Yukari is correct that Mitsuru is hiding things from everyone else, but she is completely wrong about why. Mitsuru is doing this in a misguided attempt to protect her friends from the same burdens and trauma that she bears, but Yukari's reading of the situation is that Mitsuru is forcing them to do this, and is hiding things that might give them a reason not to. Yukari often struggles to see other people's perspectives on things. She doesn't understand why Fuuka might want to be a part of SEES, or why Mitsuru might hide things from her. And she also has a habit of deciding things to be true, and then setting out on a warpath to prove that she is right about that decision. We can see this in the ghost story investigation and when she digs into the past of the Kirijo group. Both of those times, she ultimately winds up getting someone else hurt, Junpei physically and Mitsuru emotionally. It comes up a third time, and again, she hurts Mitsuru, this time physically, but it does end up saving her. Yukari tries so hard to repress her boundless compassion. Whenever someone points out to her that she is a caring person or that she's done something caring, she deflects it, she gets mad, or she gets embarrassed. But it is so natural for her that she's completely unable to hide it. Once Yukari sees how Mitsuru is suffering following her father's murder, Yukari's innate love and compassion shine through more than they ever have before. Mitsuru does not want to go on the school trip to Kyoto, but Yukari decides that she has to, and then sets out on her warpath to make that a reality. She specifically seeks out Mitsuru on the school's roof and tells her she has to go on this trip, hurting someone else along the way. Mitsuru does not want to continue SEES's mission anymore, and, in her grief, has lost any sense of purpose. But it is Yukari who again decides that she is going to give Mitsuru a new purpose, and it is Yukari who again specifically seeks her out in order to bring that about. Without Yukari's relentless determination to help Mitsuru, there would have been no reason for Mitsuru to continue in this endeavor, nor for anyone else in SEES 2 either. At that point in the journey, remember, SEES's ostensible objective to eliminate the 12 Shadows is gone, and they don't know how or why to continue onward. It is Yukari, though, who refuses to accept that, and she is determined to not only keep fighting, but to make sure Mitsuru keeps fighting as well, and they promise each other to face what comes next together. Dante describes how the people in Judecca are contorted into these grotesque poses and are completely encased in ice. They cannot move, they cannot speak, and they are hopelessly alone. And this perfectly describes Yukari in the answer. So much of what Yukari says as SEES explore the abyss of time is her frantically searching for signs of progress or desperately insisting that they do not need to take breaks. Her mental state only deteriorates as seas progress further through the abyss. The memories at the bottom of each of these doors are the moments that each person awoke to their persona. It is Yukari herself who points this out after they see her door. The point of this, though, is to help them rediscover their resolve. They had a reason they awoke to this power, and that reason did not involve Makoto. They had reasons to fight before they knew him, and they had reasons to live before they knew him. Everyone whose past was shown in a door before Judeka's becomes more positive afterward. Yukari, though, simply says this.
It doesn't matter. No point dwelling on the past.
Yukari is actively rejecting any deeper introspection of the situation C's are in, and interprets it as something happening to them, instead of what it actually is, something happening because of them. In the answer, when Yukari and Aigis read a book together, Yukari says that she regrets not reading with everybody else, but she never makes any actual effort to do this in the journey. Creating regrets for yourself is a very common manifestation of grief, and Yukari is contorting herself by doing that while at the same time insisting that they keep moving forward. She ends this interaction by saying that they'll have to work twice as hard to make up for the time they wasted. Again, she is actively rejecting any deeper introspection, this time of herself, and interprets moving forward as a physical process instead of what it actually is, an emotional one. In her other social episode in the answer, Yukari, Aigis, and Junpei watch a DVD together, and Yukari finds herself enjoying it. Again, Yukari is totally incapable of hiding how she actually feels about things, and when she lets those feelings out on the journey, she usually deflects or qualifies what she means by saying something like she's just kidding or that it's a general statement. Here, though, when she lets it slip that she enjoyed it, she deflects it by saying that Junpei was being so annoying that she had no choice but to focus on the show, and then calls it a waste of time and refuses to watch any further. Rather than being mean to Junpei in her normal, friendly, teasing way, she is lashing out at him here to deflect any sort of introspection about how contorted she is in her grief. In the journey, whenever Yukari upsets someone unintentionally or lashes out at them or hits them in the face, she immediately apologizes for it. In the answer, though, she lashes out at both Aigis and Metis and does not apologize for how she treats them until much later in the story. When Metis asks about the door to Makoto's room, Yukari angrily responds that the upper floors are none of her business and to quit being so nosy. This is something that genuinely upsets Metis, and the only time she's ever actually upstairs are when she is with other people. One of the first lines of dialogue when you explore Malebolge is Yukari asking Metis to stop glaring at her. Yukari then says, like it or not, we're all in this together. You, me, Aigis, everyone. It's Yukari's inability to hide her true feelings added again here, and I find it interesting that she specifically mentions Aigis, as if she is letting it spill out that Aigis is who she does not want to be in this together with. This all shows how crushing the grief weighing on Yukari is and how badly she is handling it. And while yes, it all fits with Judeka thematically because she is contorted and hopeless in her lamentation, it is still not the real reason why her door is Judeka. This inversion of Yukari's behavior is in line with that message I mentioned earlier that is so central to the Divine Comedy. Everything we do, good or bad, is driven by love. Ken, Akihiko, Junpei, Koromaru, and Mitsuru do not betray Makoto. Their doors being named for places in the deepest circle of Dante's hell is a metaphor for their grief. The reason Judeka, the deepest and most wicked part of hell, is reserved for Yukari, however, is because what she will try to do with the keys is a genuine and a deep betrayal. It is the act for which she must atone. Yukari is contorting her love by trying to go back to the past to try and save Makoto. She is betraying her relationship with him, and her relationship with and her promise to Mitsuru, and would risk bringing about the very same thing her father gave his life to prevent. In Fuuka's social link, Fuuka recalls that Yukari once said to her, "When you're friends, you don't keep score." Here, though, that is exactly what Yukari is doing. As Yukari pulls C's apart in her militant desire to use the keys to return to the past, she excoriates Aigis for not attending Makoto's memorial service, and heavily implies that she feels Aigis doesn't deserve to have the wild card because she didn't value her relationship with Makoto enough. She brought this up earlier in the Desert of Doors and says here now up in the dorm that Aigis is basically being a coward by being unable to decide what to do with the keys. This vindictive projection is yet another contortion from Yukari, though. Wanting to go back is itself an act of cowardice. She would deny Makoto his agency and undo the sacrifice he made and the growth his friends went through, instead of confronting her own grief, and would plunge everyone back into the same apocalyptic hopelessness they once fought so hard to overcome. Yukari's determination and drive make her the force that propels Cease upward in the journey and keeps them together. It is that same determination and drive that become inverted and make her the force that pulls everyone apart and down into Colosseo Purgatorio. They are, however, what will ultimately end up saving her, because, to use a quote directly from Purgatorio, "Love kindled by virtue always kindles another." We have already seen so many inversions in the answer. There's Aigis, once so vibrant and full of life, now sullen and withdrawn. Dante can't stop sleeping, but Aigis isn't able to sleep at all. Ken, instead of being childish and naive, is mature and insightful. Akihiko, instead of being calm and stoic, is visibly angry and frustrated. Junpei, instead of having his head in the clouds, is grounded and contemplative. Mitsuru, instead of shouldering the weight of the world on her own, is placing trust in others to carry that weight with her. And Yukari, instead of giving Mitsuru the love and support she desperately needed, is now the one in need of that very same love and support. There is the structural inversion as well. Instead of moving upward in Tartarus, the seas are now descending down the abyss. And it is in that the answer presents a grand inversion, one that will run for the remainder of its length, one that cements its themes, and one that has been in the works since the first moment Seas entered the abyss of time. Judecca is the final section of Inferno, and Inferno ends with Dante emerging at the foot of Purgatory. As he does, he notices that he is outside again, saying, "We walked out once more beneath the stars." There is something else that you might have noticed by now, something I said much earlier in this video that does not line up with the order of locations in the answer. Dante climbs up Purgatory, and then, in Paradiso, ascends to heaven. This is what the answer is inverting. The answer does not place us beneath the stars after Judecca, but instead places us somewhere far beyond them. At the time Dante wrote the Divine Comedy, it was believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, and that it was surrounded by moving spheres that contained the rest of the parts of the universe. Most of Paradiso details Dante's journey through those spheres. The first 7 of them, in the order Dante ascends them, are the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The last 2 spheres are the fixed stars, which are basically the other stars in the sky, and then finally, one called the Prima Mobile. The answer skips the first 7 circles of hell in Inferno to show the profundity of Caesar's grief and guilt. The answer does so again here by skipping all 9 of those spheres in Paradiso. Beyond those 9 spheres is a realm outside of human existence and understanding. This is the highest heaven. This is the Empyrean, the Abyss's 7th door, Aigis's door. I've read a lot of books, played a lot of video games, and seen a lot of movies and TV shows. And across them all, I don't think I have seen a character quite like Aigis. She is extremely endearing with this extraordinarily broad appeal. And oftentimes when characters have a broad appeal like that, they can ultimately wind up being quite shallow. What makes Aigis so special is that she manages to maintain that appeal while also having immense depth to her. And at the very heart of that depth is the immutable fact that she is not human. I don't mean that as an invalidation of Aigis' identity. It is an affirmation of who she is and something that she ultimately embraces. Aigis not being human does not mean she is less worthy of love than anyone else. And her recognizing that she is worthy of both being loved and giving love is the core tenet of her arc across the games that she is in. A lot of that arc is very subtle and plays out through Aigis' unvoiced dialogue in Journey. There are so many tiny details that build up to that moment on the school rooftop on March 5th that is so euphoric and then suddenly so catastrophic. These details also give context as to the meaning of her door, why it is so thematically different from the doors before it, and why the answer has inverted the structure of the Divine Comedy. Every other member of C's has dialogue around the dorm and school indicative of their personality from the moment you meet them. But nearly every time you speak to Aigis, you see her development as a person. She arrives essentially as a nearly blank slate, and through all of her dialogue, you can see how her personality is gradually shaped by her friends and the experiences she has with them. When Aigis first joins C's in the summer, she's extraordinarily naive. She has this poor grasp of social boundaries and a lack of basic knowledge of the world, but it is something that she actively strives to learn more about. She constantly peppers Makoto with questions about things that she observes and eventually advocates for herself to attend school. This is something couched as being good for team cohesion, but it builds upon that inquisitiveness Aigis showed earlier in the summer, and also plays into something else about her that I'll touch on in just a little bit. Something else that we can also see with Aigis is that she struggles with self-worth and with how she thinks people may perceive her. You can see this when you read with her in the evenings, because there, she talks about how she is a weapon and about how she needs to copy things that she's read in books in order to look more reliable. It's played for comedic effect there, but it shows how little Aigis thinks of herself, even when she's doing so as just a tool or a weapon instead of as a person. It also shows how conflicted she is between her perceived appearance as a teenage girl and her mechanical and weaponized origin. She even says at one point that once the dark hour is eliminated, there's no reason for her to continue to exist. It is, ironically, a death that is what helps Aigis begin to make the transition toward living. On October 5th, she tells Makoto that she has learned of a festival where people can speak to spirits of the deceased, and asks if that means Shinji is still with them in some capacity. Aigis comments on how, right after Shinji's death, she doesn't feel capable of understanding why everyone is so upset. But as the month goes on, she actually shows an incredible amount of insight into the grief her friends are experiencing and the growth that they go through as a result of it. She notes how Shinji's death has helped everyone grow and mature, and that even though the world appears to be spinning as normal, their relationships with him were special, and so it is only natural that they would be more affected by it. This is notably the first moment that Aigis begins to recognize the importance and the impermanence of relationships. Her dialogue throughout October shows her beginning to grapple between the purpose she was built for and the purpose she is beginning to build for herself. There are two specific remarks Aigis makes, both when you speak to her after school, that illustrate this perfectly. In the first, she says, "I was considering what I might stand to gain from attending school. But I suppose nothing will come of this line of thought. It's not something I should entertain." Aigis is conflicted here. She is eager to attend school and approaches it with genuine earnestness, but is struggling to understand why she does that, and feels that, as a weapon, it's not her role to be asking questions. Not long after this, she says something I pointed out in a different context much earlier. I was wondering what will become of me once we have defeated all the shadows. I hope I can continue to attend school. This is a notable change from what Aigis said earlier in the month about not having a reason to exist beyond defeating shadows. She is now beginning to think of a purpose beyond that. She actively wants to exist in the world now and recognizes that this is not about tactical cohesion. It's about existing in the world as a person and existing in the world with others. For the few days that Cease attends school in the summer without Aigis, she stays behind alone in the dorm all day, and she frequently breaks into Makoto's room to be close to him. The other reason why Aigis wants to attend school is because of something she's horrified of, even if she doesn't consciously recognize it as fear, nor recognize the reason behind it. After experiencing the isolative trauma of being sealed in a laboratory on an island for a decade, Aigis is deathly afraid of being left behind and alone. This fear of being left behind even manifests itself when Aigis is talking about herself as a weapon in the summer, and this also reinforces how low her self-esteem is. She has quite a few lines of dialogue where she's basically trying to sell herself to Makoto by talking about how she fights and what she's capable of because she wants to be included. She's not even able to do this convincingly, though, because she thinks so little of herself. After the events of November 4th, when Aigis is controlled by Akutsuki, she talks about how she has trouble concentrating, and about how she feels responsible for Mitsuru's father's death. Aigis is consciously feeling guilt for the first time, and the development of that emotion is something new and something scary to her. The appearance of Ryoji Mochizuki shortly after that causes her to essentially set aside the growth she has made to that point and revert back to the purpose that had originally been assigned to her. From the moment Aigis meets Makoto, she talks about her desire to be close to him, and initially this is something portrayed as quirky and strange, but ultimately harmless. Seeing Ryoji then, someone she knows is dangerous even if she can't place why, spend so much time with Makoto is upsetting for her. Aigis feels a huge amount of subconscious guilt over what she did to Makoto in 1999, and that, coupled with the conscious guilt she feels over the events of November 4th, ultimately cause her desire to be close to Makoto to become something overbearing. While it's never explicitly said in the games exactly when Aigis remembered who Ryoji is, or what she did to Makoto, as December 2nd, the date she confronts Ryoji on the bridge, approaches, her dialogue becomes much darker. The guilt that Aigis feels over sealing death inside Makoto festered within her during her time in the lab, and it begins to overwhelm her as December 2nd nears. She talks about how she feels like she's overheating and how Ryoji is all she can think about, and ultimately falls back into her assigned purpose over this. On November 30th, Aigis talks about how she isn't alive, merely operational, and that the gift of life is not something that she should possess. Aigis' struggle with her self-worth in the journey is at its nadir here, and she even goes on to say that no one would mourn her if something happened to her. Her dialogue at the beginning of December implies that she is going to do something dangerous. When she is ultimately unable to defeat Ryoji on the Moonlight Bridge, Aigis says that she is a machine that can't fulfill its purpose. But then, as she loses consciousness, follows that with something that shows her growth as a person in a much more overt way than the subtle examples before this. That she is sorry and that she is scared. She's sorry that she has endangered her friends and sorry that she withheld information from them for fear of worrying them. She's scared of being alone and left behind, and she's scared of what might happen to her and to her friends. And she is cognizant of those feelings and why she is feeling them. When Aigis returns at the end of December, her character arc is much more overt, and her social link has some of the most moving writing in the entire series. Through Aigis' social link, we can see the meaning of the Empyrean as her door, and the inversion the answer is performing with it. An inversion that is accomplished through a subversion. The Eon social link takes place at a time when the world is extremely bleak. There's trash all over the ground, cultist posters line the walls around the city, apathy syndrome victims are standing about everywhere, and almost everyone who has not fallen victim to it is talking about Nyx, death, and salvation. The game reinforces this bleak atmosphere through color desaturation and new, more somber music. Aigis' social link, though, is about finding the beauty in a world that seems so devoid of and hostile to that beauty. It's also about coming to accept the impermanence of things and the inevitability of death. Aigis says to Makoto that she will be by his side when he dies, and that his memory will live on in her. It is such a common trope for a character who isn't human to develop emotions and learn what it means to live before ultimately sacrificing themselves and their newfound personhood to save their companions. I'm not going to spoil anything else by using it as an example, but I am sure there's something you've read, played, or watched where this happens. So, if you're playing Persona 3 without knowing how it ends or about the answer, Aigis' social link and dialogue is setting up the expectation that when the confrontation with Nyx arrives, Aigis will in some way give her life to save Makoto, to save Seas, to save the world. The subversion, of course, is the reunion on the school roof on March 5th. Aigis does develop these emotions. She forges a deeply intimate connection that helps her embrace that she is worthy of love, a connection that helps her embrace that she is a person just like her friends, only for the person she forged that connection with to die in her lap as she is left to live with what comes next. And what comes next, at long last, is the Empyrean. The once traumatic isolation of the lab must now seem like paradise to Aigis, and it is a paradise that she seeks out. This is exactly what she does in her past shown at the bottom of the Empyrean.
If this is what it's like now, then I wish I could just be a simple machine again.
This is the wish that created Metis, and the wish that set in motion the events of the answer. The expression on her face here is one that appears one other time in Persona 3, when she is under Ikutsuki's control in November, the point prior to this where she is at her furthest from ever being alive. There is no sin in Dante's Empyrean. We are no longer in the nadir of hell, but at the pinnacle of heaven. In Paradiso, this is literally where God himself is, surrounded by the holiest of all angels and saints. So, why? Why are we here? Why is this Aigis' door? In his imagining of the afterlife, Dante tried to place it within our physical universe as it was understood during his time. Hell is beneath the surface of the earth, Purgatory is a mountain on earth, and the 9 spheres of heaven are all within the universe. But the Empyrean is not. The Empyrean is above and beyond all of this, outside of humanity's physical realm. It is not a place for you or for me. Dante is not even able to physically comprehend what he's seeing when he first arrives in the Empyrean. Aigis felt herself becoming lighter after she made that wish. Earlier, Aigis said she's no longer able to sleep, and here, she says she no longer dreams. In trying to escape her grief, Aigis has retreated from the world and retreated from life, and she was never human to begin with. Aigis' grief comes not just with the loss of someone she loved, nor the feelings of betrayal and failure that accompany that, but also with the loss of personhood. Aigis' grief, then, would not manifest itself as a part of hell, nor as a place her friends could ever hope to understand. Her grief would manifest itself as something beyond human comprehension. Her grief would manifest itself as the Empyrean.
But I don't... Oh, it closed.
As the answer progresses, Metis gradually gets more and more upset. She begins to feel like she's an outsider who's not being taken seriously, and by the time C's reach the Empyrean, she's completely despondent. Once you reach that door, if you go back up to the kitchen, you'll find Metis there, upset about how she's not being taken seriously by the rest of C's, even though she kept her promise that she made to Aigis and hasn't tried to hurt any of them. Metis's demeanor at this point fits with her being an allegory to Virgil. Remember that Virgil is not Dante's guide in Paradiso, which culminates in the Empyrean. He leaves Dante near the end of Purgatorio. After C's reach the bottom of the Empyrean and defeat what they have learned is a manifestation of their grief, they gain keys that will allow them to leave the Abyss of Time. As they devolve into a state of conflict over how exactly to do that, Metis's role as Aigis' guide returns to the fore. And Aigis, her sister, her charge, someone so bereft of purpose, has been shaped throughout the past year by the relationships she's forged. Now, as those very same relationships fracture, Metis guides her into embracing them, flaws and all, in order to find the purpose she has been searching for. The answer does not depict all of Inferno nor Paradiso. It depicts the places from those parts that are most thematically relevant to the answer. Hell's circles of betrayal in Malebolge and Cocytus, and a place beyond human existence and understanding in the Empyrean. The answer, and this story that I'm telling here, reach their climaxes in Colosseo Purgatorio. And, like before, what we see here is not all of Purgatorio, but it is the place from the answer most heavily based on its Divine Comedy inspiration. The previous doors are all named after places from Inferno and Paradiso, yes, and the characters associated with each door are thematically tied to what happens within them in the Divine Comedy. However, what we visually see within those doors is not. Malebolge is not a massive series of ditches, we are not traversing a frozen lake in Cocytus, and the Empyrean is something we can very much comprehend. In Purgatorio, though, Dante and Virgil arrive at a golden gate, and behind it is a large circular rampart. This is the gate to Purgatory, and by extension, the gate to heaven. And there are 2 keys needed to unlock it. The first key is one much rarer, but the other requires great skill and genius, and is one that must be forged. This key is the more important of the 2. This is the key that must untie the knot. We're still within the answer's inversion here, and even though I've explained what it is, I haven't explained the reason behind it yet. Seas are always descending. They descend down into the Desert of Doors. They descend down the Abyss of Time. The descent is constant. Seas descend down the Empyrean as though they are leaving. And indeed, once they reach the bottom, they are given the means to do exactly that. After leaving Hell, Dante is always ascending. He climbs up Purgatory and he ascends through the spheres of heaven, and he does this to understand what it means to love God. C's ordeal, though, is not a religious one. It is one to understand their grief and their reasons to continue living, and therefore it is a descent out of the afterlife. C's are not entering the gates of heaven, but instead exiting through them, so that, after being trapped inside for so long in their grief, they can emerge once more beneath the stars. Dante's Purgatory is a massive mountain where those worthy of salvation must atone for their sins in life prior to being granted entry to heaven. At the base of it are two sections that not everyone has to pass through. One is for those who were excommunicated, basically kicked out of the church, and one for those who only repented their sins as they died. There are then 7 terraces everybody must pass through, and each is representative of a sin. You might recognize these sins from Persona 5 because they are the 7 deadly sins. From bottom to top in Dante's Purgatory, these sins are pride, envy, wrath, sloth, avarice, gluttony, and finally, lust. The most difficult part of producing this video for me, by far, was finding clips to use for when I described the sections of Inferno and Paradiso. I'm very grateful then that Persona 5 has given me an easy way out of having to do the same for Purgatorio. An atonement for the 7 deadly sins is not what is happening in the answer, though. What is happening in the answer's depiction of Purgatory is an atonement, yes, but an atonement for regret. A purgation of regret. The events of Colosseo Purgatorio reflect what happens on the terrace of lust, but not because of the sin lust. It's because of what happens on that terrace. These are the climactic moments of the answer, the narrative payoff for the 20+ hours of gameplay reflective of an oppressive and a freezing grief. I'm going to reiterate exactly what happens here while bringing up more connections between this place and Purgatorio. A very long time ago, I asked you to keep in mind this idea that Metis is an allegory for Virgil, and that she's meant to appeal to Aigis. This is where that allegory and that appeal finally bear fruit. My first interpretation of Metis's character was that she is Aigis's emotions. I don't suppose that's wrong, but it's not entirely accurate. There is something so much more to Metis's identity. Yukari has decided that she wants to go back, and is out on her warpath to manifest that. Aigis is horribly conflicted, unable to make up her mind, and when Yukari suggests that the keys can be taken by force, Metis leaps at the suggestion. When Aigis and Metis enter the waiting area of Colosseo Purgatorio for the first time, Aigis is extremely hesitant, and Metis is adamant that she won't let anyone take her sister's key. At the start of the answer, Aigis made Metis promise that she wouldn't hurt the rest of Seas, and here Aigis is livid at the idea of Metis doing exactly that. It is in response to this that Metis reveals she has been withholding something from Aigis. Aigis' part of the key and the wild card are connected, and if she fails here, she could die. Upon actually entering Colosseo Purgatorio for the first time, but before Aigis and Metis fight Akihiko and Ken, we return to someone I've not brought up for some time, Fuuka. Like Aigis, Fuuka is horribly conflicted over this and does not want to be in a situation where her friends are fighting. Fuuka struggles with being a people pleaser, and so for her, this situation is especially agonizing. Here, though, she makes the choice to side with Aigis. If you remember, Fuuka is an allegory for Saint Lucia, and in Purgatorio, Dante reaches the gates of heaven with Lucia's help. Lucia chooses to carry Dante to those gates, something that she does to help him with his journey, just as Fuuka makes the choice to help Aigis here, and actively reject Metis' suggestion of helping everyone as she tries to do in the journey. Fuuka trusts Aigis, her closest friend in Seas, to come to the right decision, whatever that's going to be, and she is going to help her find it. When Akihiko tells Aigis that if she's unable to make a decision, she should just give up her key and walk away, Metis refuses to countenance this and plunges her sister into battle with the two of them. After they are defeated, they disappear as 2 fires ignite on the rampart of Colosseo Purgatorio. These fires are part of Purgatorio's terrace of lust, and they are crucial to Dante's journey and to the events that are unfolding here. Metis has already broken the promise she made to Aigis to not hurt her friends, and now Metis reveals that if those flames go out, her friends could die, Aigis never wanted to do this in the first place, and is apoplectic over this revelation, but is now left with no choice but to continue fighting. Metis attempts to spur Aigis onward by revealing further that it's not that Aigis could die if she gives up her key, but that she will die. After Aigis gained the power of the wild card and visited the Velvet Room for the first time, she began to grapple with the idea that the answer to life Makoto found was death, and that this might be the same one she finds. She remarks, though, that the possibility of dying didn't bother her at the time. Throughout the answer, this possibility that she could die is something she has been hiding from her friends, not wanting to upset them further. We see here now, in a much darker way, Aigis' struggles of self-worth. As Fuuka is shocked Aigis has hidden this from her and from all of Seas. Fuuka loves her, but Aigis is not able to see herself as a person worthy of that love. She can only see herself and this worry that she may die as just another burden her friends would have to bear. After this, and after Metis' broken promise, Aigis rejects Metis' attempt to call her sister, but to Metis, this does not matter. She vows to continue in this endeavor regardless of what Aigis thinks of her. Junpei and Koromaru are duly defeated, and, like Akihiko and Ken before them, disappear as two more flames alight around the rampart.
I thought we were all searching for the same thing. I thought we all cared about each other. So why?
Aigis believes her dying would be better than putting herself and her friends through this conflict. She is afraid to make a choice. Whatever she decides, going forward or going back, is going to hurt someone she loves. Whatever she decides is going to hurt someone who helped make her who she is. Aigis is unable to bring herself to do that, thinking so little of herself that she views giving up her key as the option that would hurt her friends the least. She has already wished away her life. She wished to be a simple machine again, and for someone who was once so eagerly and so earnestly exploring a brand new world and forging connections in it, is this not wishing for death already? What difference would it make if she gave Yukari her key and actually died? The flames that ignited after Akihiko, Ken, Junpei, and Koromaru were defeated are, in Purgatorio, the final step of one's purgation. A soul must pass through a flame representative of a final cleansing of sin before proceeding onward and upward to heaven, or, in this case, a final cleansing of regret before returning to the world outside. The way Virgil describes passing through the flame perfectly captures what this indispensable and final step in a seemingly never-ending process must feel like. Within that flame, there may be torment, but there is no death. Aigis has never had to deal with conflict in her relationships before. And, as she points out herself during her rapidly approaching moment of anagnorisis, these feelings are torment, but they are feelings that ultimately must be confronted. Pilgrims in purgatory suffer ironic punishments matching their sins, just like in Inferno, and they last for unimaginably long periods of time. But, unlike in hell, they will end. Just as with Seas being trapped in this time loop, there is an end, and there is something much better on the other side. Passing through the flames is not something that is easy, it is something that must be earned, and once it is earned, it is something that must be done. It is something that is terrifying, but Virgil stresses the euphoria of what comes after while acknowledging that terror. Put by your fears and enter to your peace. The point of the memories behind the first 6 doors is to remind Seas that the reason for doing all they did over the past year, the reason for risking their lives and enduring so much terror, so much trauma, was not Makoto. Their lives are better for having known him, but the end of his life does not mean the ends of theirs. The abyss of time, then, is their purgation, an agonizing and seemingly endless journey that culminates in flames thawing regret and with the realization that they can go on living because of each other. They can go on living with each other. Aigis's memory, however, is behind the seventh door. Her reason for living was Makoto. She says it there in the memory, and she says it in the journey. Aigis's purgation is not one culminating in the rediscovery of purpose, but the discovery of a new one. And when she is prepared to abandon that search, Metis is left to her last resort. For the first two battles of Colosseo Purgatorio, and for really all of the answer up to this point, Metis has been trying to force Aigis through things. Aigis never expresses any sort of desire to do this at all, but Metis pulls her into the situation to begin with, and as she does so, withholds information from her in a misguided attempt at protecting her. Metis wants Aigis to like her and is afraid of upsetting her, but her childish behavior and her insistence on taking charge causes her to be treated as an outsider by the rest of SEAS. Despite that, she insists on carrying on protecting her sister, something she never actually does because she doesn't know what it looks like. This ultimately ends up being a naive endeavor for her, and it all begins to fall apart. However, Metis does deeply love Aigis and cherishes every moment she gets to spend with her sister. She is deeply afraid of being separated from her, and Metis pleads again that she would do anything it takes to protect Aigis, even if it means Aigis hates her. But this time, she adds something new, something honest. Metis adds that she does this because Aigis is all she has. Aigis realizes that this is how she felt about Makoto, but she still refuses to fight the people who helped make her who she is, even if this refusal is something that kills her. Metis's endeavor to protect Aigis, her sister, finally shatters.
Please don't leave me behind. I'll give my life for the key too. And if that doesn't work, then I'm coming with you, so we can always be together.
Aigis realizes here who her sister is exactly, and what exactly her appeal was guiding her toward all this time.
You always seem to remind me of the things that are most important.
What Aigis wished away by wishing to be a simple machine again, the wish that created Metis, the wish that set in motion the events of the answer, was what shaped who she is and what made her alive. It was her friends. In rejecting them, Aigis created a manifestation of those people, flaws and all. When she embraces Metis here, Aigis is embracing all the people who have helped her realize she is not a scared, sorry machine that cannot fulfill its purpose, but instead a person with boundless, infinite potential. When Aigis embraces Metis, she is embracing the recognition, the discovery, that she is just as worthy of love as anyone else.
Metis. I'm sorry. Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. I know how painful it is to be left behind like that. How could I do that to you?
She's not just saying these things to Metis, she's also saying them to her friends. Aigis is embracing that her own feelings matter and that she matters, and that killing herself is the decision that would hurt the most for the people she loves, not the least. It's here that Aigis, Fuuka, and Metis come to a decision about what to do with the true key, and although Aigis says fixing or letting go of the past isn't the right way to think about the situation, you, as the player, are not made privy to what the actual decision is just yet. Aigis's purgation has not been completed, and there are still two others yet to occur. Aigis has found purpose embracing the relationships that helped form her, and she has made a decision, and so, narratively, it makes sense that after this, The final battle within Colosseo Purgatorio is with the answer's antagonist. Yukari is completely unwilling to consider anyone else's perspective. She shuts down any attempts at doing anything other than continuing to explore the abyss of time, and, when she contorts herself with her decision to go back, refuses to discuss it with anyone, instead jumping to the conclusion that the keys can be taken by force and that is what she's going to try to do. Seeing this, Mitsuru knows that talking to her will not solve anything. Yukari would simply reject it. Yukari then has to fail. In choosing to stand with Yukari, Mitsuru, like Fuuka, is trusting Aigis to come to the right decision, even if she isn't sure what it might be, but also to help Yukari realize that her decision is wrong. In the answer, Yukari is a mirror to Aigis. Both of them are in this utterly wretched state throughout it, frozen in their grief and abandoning the relationships that helped them grow as people. Yukari refuses to return to the dorm, hiding behind cram school, while Aigis has withdrawn from school entirely and is going to move back to the lab. Yukari, fitting for her extroverted personality, is simply more outspoken in her rejection of her relationships than the more introverted Aigis. Metis' appeal to Aigis is one to help Aigis embrace the relationships that made her alive, and in that way, with the knowledge that Aigis is an allegory for Dante, she plays the role of Aigis' Virgil. Mitsuru, though, plays the same role for Yukari, even if it is mostly truncated to this one cathartic and euphoric moment. Like Aigis, Yukari thinks very little of herself, but, as with their rejection of their relationships, this manifests differently. Metis guides Aigis into discovering that she is someone capable of being loved and giving love, something that Aigis was unable to see in her grief, only seeing herself as that simple machine. This is where that quote I mentioned earlier from Purgatorio when I talked about Yukari becomes relevant. Love, kindled by virtue, always kindles another. When Mitsuru lost her resolve after the death of her father, Yukari kindled a new resolve for her, and now Mitsuru is able to rekindle Yukari's.
And you're someone I care about, Yukari.
Yukari believes this grief, this pain, is never going to stop. And it is Mitsuru who guides her into realizing that there is a way out.
And Yukari, you've kept yours locked up for too long.
What Yukari did for Mitsuru in November may not have been something significant to Yukari at the time, because it was an act of love so natural to her. But to Mitsuru, it was a way out of her grief, of her pain, through love. Mitsuru guides Yukari into recognizing that though there may be torment, she is not alone in her grief, and that Yukari's way out is through the same path she helped Mitsuru find.
It's all right. We're here for you. Your friends are here for you.
At the bottom of the Empyrean, Mitsuru is the first to react to what appears there, and when Erebus appears later, she is the first to react to it as well. These are reactions to the consequences of her taking everyone's evokers and endangering them when Metis appeared. She has learned from that mistake, and in helping Yukari work through her grief, she has learned from the mistake of defending Aigis over her decision to withdraw from school. Mitsuru's purgation, then, is one she undergoes willingly, hand in hand with Yukari. After this, Aigis reveals the decision that she, Fuuka, and Metis arrived at. Ken and Akihiko want to move on, and Yukari wants to go back, but Aigis has arrived at a third decision outside of that binary. Using the true key to finally learn what Makoto did is a decision that respects the wishes and the grief of all of her friends. It's also one that brings them back together, and one that achieves something that has certainly been earned. Closure. As Ken and Fuuka both point out during the answer, They know Makoto must have done something, but they don't know what. Aigis has brought her friends back together and forged that second key, that key that needs much skill and genius, that one that will untie the knot. She knows what to do next, and she's about to find the answer that all of this was in search of. Dante, like Aigis, is afraid at this part of Purgatorio. He's afraid to pass through the flames, not believing Virgil when Virgil tells him that he will not be hurt if he does so, just as Aigis was afraid to confront conflict in her relationships. What finally compels Dante to complete his purgation is Virgil's revelation that on the other side of the flames, Beatrice awaits Dante. For Aigis, though, moving onward is not about Makoto, even if she do see him again shortly. Aigis realizes that how Metis felt earlier was how she felt when Makoto died. She would have gladly died in his stead or died with him, but instead, Aigis feels left behind and alone. The realization that she and her friends are able to move forward together is what spurs Aigis to finally embrace Metis, to embrace herself, to embrace her friends, and to arrive at the decision that brings them back together. There may not be any literal flames, but at long last, this is Aigis's purgation. As I mentioned about 2 hours ago when I discussed Malebolge, the door that leads to the mall is not a door to the mall. It is a door to what C's need, and what they need now is an understanding of what happened to Makoto. Aigis and the rest of C's come to understand that he died so that he could create the seal separating Nyx from Erebus. Erebus is not from the Divine Comedy, but the reason it is the final boss of the answer very much is. Right at about the halfway point of Purgatorio, and therefore all of the Divine Comedy, a pilgrim undergoing his purgation talks to Dante about people's tendency to blame God for things that have gone wrong in their lives. Noting that there will be no purpose in life at all if God was the cause of and solution to all of the problems in the world, the pilgrim encourages Dante and the reader to look at themselves. If the present world has gone astray, in you is the cause. Erebus is a manifestation of people's desire for death, and Aigis, Ken, Mitsuru, and Yukari all note that the feelings that created Erebus came from within them. After defeating it, Mitsuru says something that very much fits what Dante was talking about in the Divine Comedy, and why the answer is built around it.
People struggle to keep death at bay, all the while forgetting what makes life worth living in the first place.
Dante believed that living is about making an effort to live. Persona 3 says that to live is about making an effort to change. Aigis is, and if you were playing this game totally blind, your belief at this point about the wild card is that someone with that power is going to die as a result of it. Makoto, the only person before her to wield it, did die, and Aigis has had this idea in her head that she will as well. Her expectation of what her answer will be is death. As she goes to open the dorm's front door, she takes the opportunity to do something Makoto never had the chance to tell her friends she loves them. When Yukari, who was once so hostile to Aigis, decides that Aigis does not need to say goodbye because this is not the end of their friendship, Aigis comes to the realization that the answer she found is the same one Makoto did, but that it is not death.
Oh, friendship. If something's mere presence can make you realize you're alive, and if that something isn't death, maybe it's friendship. Is that the answer to life I'm supposed to find?
The hell and purgation they have just been through solidified their relationships with each other. They're able to move on from Makoto's death with each other, while keeping in mind all of the things they had learned from their time with him and with each other. Again, Dante is always ascending as he moves through purgatory and heaven, and he unlocks those gates from outside so that he may enter purgatory and continue upward. Aigis, after her long descent through the Empyrean and through Colosseo Purgatorio, unlocks the dorm's front door from the inside. In the Velvet Room, Igor points out that the power of the wildcard has had an effect on Aigis' friends, and this ties back into Aigis finally embracing that she is worthy of love from all the people who helped make her who she is, because in turn, Aigis has helped make them who they are. In the Divine Comedy, Virgil departs Dante, and he gives his charge a final farewell, where he tells Dante that he is past the steep ways, past the narrow part. He tells Dante that he has attained free will and discovered a purpose. He has descended through hell and climbed up purgatory, and the world is Dante's to experience as he sees fit. The Answer has another inversion for us here. Metis, Aigis' guide, and her sister, does not depart Aigis as Virgil departs Dante. Instead, she returns to her. Aigis embraces her self-appointed guide and sister, the manifestation of her relationships and growth, and Metis disappears along with Aigis' armor. Aigis had cast off her relationships in wishing to be a simple machine again, and as a result, was fragile and vulnerable. But now that she has embraced those relationships and forged a newfound purpose in life, she no longer needs to be protected by anything other than the people she loves. If you can remember back to very early in this video, I mentioned that Aigis not being able to sleep is the Answer's way of saying that she has lost her way in life, inverting how Dante's own drowsiness was his way of saying he'd lost his way. Now that Aigis has found that way, that answer, she finally sleeps again. She finally dreams again of memories of the people who made her who she is. When her friends think Aigis is dying in the Velvet Room, and when Aigis does not wake up along with the rest of them on April 1st, Yukari is the first to her side each time. She is also the one most outwardly relieved that Aigis is okay, and sums up the Answer's story of an emergence from grief through love here.
We were right next to each other, suffering over the exact same things. Looking back, I feel kinda stupid. Why did we ever think we were all alone? I guess we're more alike than we thought.
In the morning, when Aigis asks to re-enroll in school, she specifically mentions Yukari as who she wants to attend school with. And it is Yukari who, in her uniquely direct way, encourages Mitsuru to make this happen. Yukari, who has such trouble reading others, is able to recognize Aigis' reticence and help her along, and recognize that Aigis is her friend. This is the culmination of the Answer's grand inversion, and with it, the Answer's story. A journey not to God, but to an answer to life. Seas, after being trapped inside for so long in their grief, have finally emerged once more beneath the stars.
Hey, so... if you're gonna live in the dorms next year, do you wanna be roommates?
Huh?
I imagine you still need one. And also, it just makes sense, you know? Because we're friends, aren't we?
Yeah, let's do it!
This offer to live together and Yukari asking if they're friends is a final emergence from grief through an offer of love from someone who until now never asked but decided, and an enthusiastic acceptance of it from someone who has embraced that she is worthy of accepting and giving that love. As Inferno ends with a mention of the stars, so do the other two parts of the Divine Comedy. Paradiso, and the whole of the poem, ends with something certainly fitting this story about breaking a time loop, a cycle of grief, through embracing the idea that you are not alone and that you are loved. Already I could feel my being turned, instinct and intellect balanced equally, as in a wheel whose motion nothing jars, by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. However, the answer ends with Purgatorio, and what Purgatorio ends with is something beautifully and perfectly appropriate for a return with a newfound purpose to the world outside. I came back from those holiest waters new, remade, reborn, like a sun-wakened tree that spreads new foliage to the spring dew. In sweetest freshness, healed of winter's scars, perfect, pure, and ready for the stars. I don't know how many people are going to watch this video, but if you were one of them, thank you so much. It means a lot to me, genuinely, that you were kind enough to give me over 2 hours of your time to hear me talk about this. This project is something that survived me being laid off and a move across the United States, and I'm extremely proud of myself for not abandoning it and continuing to give it my all. I've been working on this video since December 2024, and have spent so much time since then researching the Divine Comedy, the Persona games, and how to actually make a video essay. This all began when I looked up what the names of the doors of the Abyss of Time meant, and I couldn't find much about it online, so in the search for something to do, I decided to read the Divine Comedy myself. When I realized that pretty much all of the answer is based around it though, I decided to make this video to share something that people might not know about Persona 3. I find this game to be incredibly moving, and it certainly had a profound effect on my life, and it always bothered me seeing all the shit that the answer gets. I didn't realize how personally meaningful this project would become, or that it would ever actually be a project instead of just me reading a book, but I'm so glad it did. This has given me an even bigger appreciation of a game that already meant so much to me, and working on it was something that helped keep me mentally well during a very stressful time in my life. You can follow me on Twitter at @AnEvilMeanGuy, it's also linked below, and to like and subscribe here. But what I would appreciate more than any of those things is your feedback on this video. This is my first time ever doing anything remotely similar to it, and I taught myself how to use DaVinci Resolve and do audio recording to make it. I'm sure that fact shows in this video, so I would love to get better at it. There's a couple people I would like to thank. The talk box that I used in this video was provided courtesy of Neo. It saved me a ton of time and let me add context without having to add to the length of the video. I am extremely appreciative of his generosity. You can follow Neo on Twitter at 2Bepsi, it's linked below, and support him by buying prints of his art and subscribing to his Patreon. Both of those links are below as well. He's a fantastic artist, and his art is some of my favorite art from the whole Persona fandom. I would also like to give a boundless thank you to Isabel. Without your help and your eternal patience, this video would not have been as good as it was. You should have chosen a career of less time off than teaching if you didn't want to get roped into this as much as you were. Again, I'm not sure how many people are going to watch this, but if even just one person comes away from it with a new appreciation for the answer, then I'll consider this project that was already very meaningful to me even more so. I have made a document linked in the description with some more commentary on parts of the video and on the Divine Comedy, along with sources for all of the art that I used in this video. My final remarks here, after all this, are that I think being curious and inquisitive are extremely important. especially now. There's always something more to learn, and if something interests you, if you care about something, then there is so much to gain from looking further into it. Thanks again for watching.
Activating. I am Aigis, the last of the anti-shadow suppression weapons. Preparing to eliminate all hostile targets. Palladium! Activate! I comprehend. The enemy escaped!